First Contact with Joshua Pope.
Hello, Earthlings. How you doing today? Welcome back to First Contact Radio. Today, it is Wednesday. It is the 14th day of Tishri. Of course, it is the 4th day of October on the Gregorian calendar. Just a quick look before we move on so we know where we are for today, because this definitely has an impact on everything that's going on. We could see right here. We're on the eve of Sukkot beginning, and it's going to go for the next 7 days. This is basically the understanding or celebration of the Exodus and the time that the Jews spent out wandering through the desert, but under the direction of God. So it is a time of faith. Okay, so we are approaching a time of faith, which is very important. It also coincides right here. If we look at the astrology for the course of today, we see our moon sign is in Pisces, coming out of Pisces, getting ready to go into Aries. Pisces in the tarot card is representative of the card of the moon, which represents walking through the dark, walking into the unknown, hence faith. So faith seems to be a theme of what's going on today, understanding something that is happening a little bit deeper behind the surface. Not getting caught up emotionally, because that's a big part of the mix. Now, the last couple days, the story that's been really taking up all the headlines has been the story of the shooter, Stephen Paddock, in Las Vegas. What happened to this man that caused him to go crazy? Yesterday on the show, I proposed several different theories that are a compilation of theories coming from a variety of the social networks out there, namely the Donald and over at 4chan. There's a number of other places which are doing investigations. Godlike Productions is another good one. You can just search online. Infowars.com always is on top of things as well. So you check out these sites and we see the official story that's being told. The official story is this man just snapped and he went on the shooting spree by himself. However, as I pointed out yesterday through the police recordings, that this was not a lone gunman by any means. A lone gunman takes out of the picture the whole idea of it being a conspiracy, because a conspiracy is when you have two or more people that are focused on doing some sort of event. Well, we can start to piece the puzzle together in a different way, and I was watching last night the media, the way that they're spinning this. They're now starting to come around to the multiple shooter angle by asking those questions and presenting those ideas, because they're not going to be able to find any other way around it. There's too many evidence. There's too many people who were witness to the multiple shooters and the event that was taking place. So let's get to some of these stories here. I want to cover a lot of things today. First right here says, receipt showing Paddock had another guest in his room before the shooting spree. This is over at Infowars. Paul Joseph Watson says the receipt shows an employee named Antonio served two guests and IRA MB, which means in-room dining at Mandalay Bay. Table is for the room 32135, which equates to Paddock's room number 135 on the 32nd floor. Paddock ordered a burger, bagel, cream cheese, potato soup, one bottle water, and 2 Pepsis, suggesting there was another person eating with him in the room. And then when you look at the receipt right here, number of guests, it lists 2. Okay, so I'm going to leave the link available so you could check that out. But again, there's a little bit of a confirmation of what people are already noticing that's going on, that there was more than one shooter. Yesterday I spoke about the possibility that on the 4th floor there was some shooting. We have a number of people who are just saying this was a strobe light, nothing more than a strobe light. There was a gentleman who was going out to Vegas. He was out in Vegas and he was going to try to get a shot of Mandalay Bay, see what was going on with that window, if there was any cracks or holes in that window. It appeared to be in the one picture I pulled up yesterday. However, digital imagery could have glitches in it, as we all know. So we'll wait to find out. There is also footage that has popped up during the course of Big and Rich's set when someone in the audience said they happened to turn their camera and there was this strobe light coming from about the same location where it was during the shooting. If that's the case, then it is lending credibility to it was a strobe light. However, who's to say at this point in time? Uh, but it's an important piece of the story, and it certainly has got a lot of people thinking about multiple shooters, which we know from the police scanner is exactly what was going on. Now, they're really going to paint a picture of this guy, Stephen, as being all kind of crazy because they want to destroy the narrative that there were more than one shooter. But they're unable to do so because there's far too many clues that are left behind. However, in this particular story right here, Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock was prescribed anti-anxiety drug months before the killing. Las Vegas killer Stephen Paddock was prescribed the anti-anxiety drug Valium in June, a drug that has aggressive behavior as a possible side effect. The Las Vegas Review-Journal reported Paddock was prescribed the medication in June. He was supposed to take 1 pill per day and fulfilled prescription on the same day it was written. Okay, so the whole point of this is they're wanting to really paint this guy out to be a psycho so that we as the public buy their whole story that this was a lone gunman. However, if you just look at the information that's been put out thus far, you could see that this is the work of more than one 64-year-old man. Okay, none of the pieces add up to what they're saying. Last night when the police department of Las Vegas gave their briefing on things, there were a few cryptic things that they said in regards to that meeting. At one point, he did talk about the possibility that Stephen was radicalized. Well, this is something that from the outset we knew because ISIS claimed responsibility. There are those that say ISIS will claim responsibility for any act, but that's not the case. I've posted some things up last night for you to check out up at the Twitter feeds. They don't just claim every case. So the fact that they're doing this seems to have some implication that this is actually what they're saying. The FBI dismissed it right away, so now we're left at an interesting dilemma. Do we believe our FBI, who has right away told us nothing is going on, or do we believe the ISIS people who claimed the responsibility for this? The FBI, we know, unfortunately, has lost a lot of credibility because Comey has taken it from the Federal Bureau of Investigation to it now just being the Federal Bureau of Matters. And we've seen so much corruption in there that is very problematic. But now I'm going to show you some stuff here where the story takes a very interesting twist. This is definitely being investigated. The mainstream news is not talking about this, so this might be one of the first places you're hearing about it if you're not on the social networks. This story here is quite involved. There's a nice infographic here. You can enlarge this, go through it, but basically says right here, I'm going to leave that for you to read. I'll just kind of reiterate it for you. Basically what the whole premise is here is that Stephen Paddock was an undercover FBI agent, and this was a gun running deal or a sting operation that went bad. And in the course of it going bad, Stephen Paddock was shot by those he was trying to entrap in the sting operation, which were members of ISIS. And when it went bad, he was shot before the event even occurred. I suggested that was a possibility yesterday. According to this, he was shot before the event even occurred, and then they themselves, the members of ISIS, carried out the attack and then left the room, and this man, Stephen Paddock, was there dead on the floor, and he was then blamed for this incident. Now, he certainly may have had some part in this. If he was an undercover FBI agent, then that certainly does bring a whole new twist to the story. It might have some explanation of why all these guns and weapons were found at his home, if indeed he was involved with gun running and such operations. Now, part of the story right here at the very bottom involves, and this kind of gives a little credence to it here, it talks about this gentleman, Mr. Yee, right here, and it says that an affidavit is filed March 2014, unsealed March 26, 2014, charging Yee with violating Title 18 United States Code 1343 and 1346 for honest services, wire fraud by allegedly taking bribes from Waltech Kung Tong, and other medical marijuana legislation from undercover FBI agents in return for promises of official action, and Title 18 U.S. Code Sections 371-922A1 and 9221, for conspiracy to deal firearms without a license, to illegally import firearms from the Philippines by setting up an international weapons trafficking deal with undercover FBI agents. He was named, along with 28 other defendants, in the FBI criminal complaint. Okay, so what we've got here are several of the pieces of the puzzle that we're looking at. We have the undercover FBI agent that is not named in here. Could that possibly be Stephen Paddock? We also have the connection to the Philippines, where we are told that this woman Marilou is from. The story of Marilou is also getting quite intricate indeed, and is connecting her in ways to having worked and done some contract work or assistance work, excuse me, with different alphabet agencies along the way, namely the CIA. Again, this is speculation until it is proven to be true, but this is where investigation seems to be leading at this point in time. Now, here's a piece of information right here, which is aircraft tail numbers, and this information is alleging to connect Stephen Paddock to others who were involved with these intelligence organizations, again linking him to the idea that he was an undercover agent. If this indeed is the case, then it really brings a whole lot of interesting mix to the story, because if it's the case, then this is a gun running deal gone bad. The Las Vegas Police Department, from what I'm reading and understanding, seem to have an understanding about this, but the FBI are the ones who have egg on their face because of the fact that this was a deal that went bad. Someone was killed and all the shooting took place. So they don't really want to release that information, and it seems as if there's some sort of infighting going on between the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Matters at this point, and the Las Vegas Police Department. Time will tell as the investigation continues to unfold. Just wanted to bring to light some of this information which is not being discussed out there in the main channels. Now, there were pictures that were leaked out. The police officers from Las Vegas yesterday confirmed that these indeed were pictures from the room, or so we are told. If we look at these pictures here, we could see some of the setup that was in the room. There's alleged to be a note on the table, a possible suicide note, along with the writing utensil used to write that note, the various guns on the floor. And we could see in this image right here the body of Stephen. He got his feet here, right here. We don't see his head. There's other pictures of the upper part of his body, but there is gunshot wounds and blood coming from it, and rather than just show you that, you can go find that online very easily. Okay, you can find that very easily. So one of the things that is interesting in photos is we're told that Stephen killed himself before the police got there, in one story. The other story is that he was shot by the police when they arrived there. When you listen to the police scanners, I don't remember hearing that there was a shot that took place once they breached the room. I remember them saying there is just one suspect down, but he seemed to be down already. I didn't hear any shots, and I don't recall anybody else in that has looked at this, talking about any shots after the fact. So if he was shot beforehand, he was dead, which leans credits to he was dead when this thing already happened. And though he was apparently shooting himself in the head, there was a bullet and seemed to be some sort of wound right in his sternum, right in the middle of his chest there, as if someone shot him from point blank range. So it's quite possible that that might have been what happened. He was shot, and what we're seeing here is not the result of a suicide, but actually of a murder by those who were actually responsible for the shooting. There does seem to be a consensus from those who are really looking to this, that this was multiple shooters. This was a situation where he, as the patsy, was already shot, and it was a whole situation gone bad. The FBI met with the woman who I said momentarily does have some connections, looks to various alphabet agencies in different ways, and she met with the Las Vegas or with the police Tuesday night. She flew in, said alleged Las Vegas shooter Stephen Paddock's girlfriend is back in the U.S. She landed at LAX at 7:17 p.m. on Philippine Air Flight 102. Multiple law enforcement sources tell ABC News. Danley, who was returning from the Philippines, was taken out back so she could not be seen in public, and she was met by FBI agents immediately upon landing. While agents met Danley upon the plane, she's not officially in custody and is free to go where she pleases. The 60-year-old Danley was in a relationship with Paddock for a few years, reportedly meeting while she worked at a Hostess in Reno, Nevada casino. Danley left her husband, Gary Danley, in 2013, moved in with Paddock. She officially filed for divorce in 2015. Okay, says she left the U.S. for the Philippines on September 15th, about 2 weeks before the deadly attacks. She was in the Philippines when the money was wired to, so she was in the Philippines when the money was wired to the country. And Danley took a trip to Hong Kong from the Philippines September 22nd for a 4-day trip. Okay, here we have pictures of them together. There's information floating on the internet about her being married to multiple people at the same time. A lot of conflicting stories, but again, there is some suggestion that she is, just like Stephen, connected to these agencies, maybe an undercover agent herself, and time will tell, but we'll see how the media really gathers this information and continues to tell their story. So let's take this story to another twist now, because we have the side where the physical events are happening, but we also live in a world where there is a lot of darkness taking place. And we know that there are those who do things for nefarious purposes, for very dark purposes. We've heard plenty of stories of those who are casting spells against the president and trying to create darkness in the world. We've heard the stories of Bohemian Grove and the sacrifices they're doing to Moloch out there, and the various, numerological coincidences that occur when you start looking at all of the evidence and start adding the numbers and so on and so forth. So here is something very interesting pulled up in this regards to consider. Again, here's a really nice infographic that has been put together. Talks about this number 13 on its neck right here. You see he has this number 13, and it says 13 leaves, olive branches, 13 bars and stripes in the shield, 13 feathers in the tail, 13 arrows, 13 letters, E pluribus union, 13 stars, 32 long feathers representing masonry, 13 granite stones. So 13 is a popular number. Died on the 32nd floor. There's a connection to the Masons in the 32nd degree. When you look at the locations of the shooting, being in front of the pyramids, being by the obelisks, in many ways, some are considering that this looked like it was set up here in order to be some sort of sacrifice, and that the entire area here was a altar, if you will, in which there was a blood sacrifice made, as we had all of the elements there that are possibly connected to such a thing. So what's the reality of this? I don't know. Time's going to tell, but it would not be the first time that there was some dark practice that came from some Illuminati sources. We know that they do the sacrifices to Moloch over out in Bohemian Grove. We've heard of plenty of other type of murder rituals that are done, so it wouldn't put it past me that this might be occurring. It's a big infographic. You need to go look through this yourself. But this leads me on to the next point, because as we look throughout the events taking place, not just here in Vegas, but throughout the world, we see a lot of darkness. We see a lot of evil. The question comes to mind is, how is so much evil going on out there in the world? Where is this evil coming from? Do people suddenly just become evil of their own accord, or is there something more? I contend that there is something more that is pushing the buttons, and it is the weak-minded individuals that are being influenced by these various energies. The reason I say this is for a long time we have heard from our spiritual teachers upon this planet of this battle between good and evil. And this story of the battle of good and evil goes all the way back to the story of Archangel Michael and the beast that was kicked out of heaven, who then ended up on earth, and all the problems that were being created because that beast here upon the earthly plane. The story unfolds in the book of Revelation. We could read it. We've read it over and over and over. This is a piece here. It's from the Nag Hammadi Library. It's the reality of the Archons, reality of the rulers, hypostasis of the Archons. Says at the beginning, because of the reality of the authorities inspired by the Spirit of the Father of Truth, the great messenger, referring to the authorities of the darkness, told us that our contest is not against flesh and blood, rather the authorities of the universe and the spirits of wickedness. I have sent you this because you inquire about the reality of the authorities. Their chief is blind. Because of his power and his ignorance and his arrogance, he said that he was God and that there was no other but him. But when he said this, he sinned against all. The speech rose up to incorruptibility. Then there was a voice that came forth from incorruptibility saying, "You are wrong, Samuel," that is, God of the blind. His thoughts became blind, and having expelled his power, that is, the blasphemy he had spoken, he pursued it down to chaos and the abyss. His mother, at the instigation of Pistis Sophia, she established each of his offspring in conformity with its power, after the pattern of the realms that are above, for by starting from the invisible world, the visible world was invented. As incorruptibility looked down into the region of the waters, her image appeared in the waters, and the authorities of the darkness became enamored of her. But they could not lay hold of her, since that image which had appeared to them in the waters, because of the weakness, since beings that merely have soul cannot lay hold of those that have spirit, for they were from below, while it was from above. This is the reason that why incorruptibility looked down into that region, so that by the Father's will she might bring all into union with the light. The rulers laid their plans and said, "Come, let us create a human that will be soil from the earth." They modeled their creatures as one wholly of the earth. The rulers have bodies that are both female and male, and the faces are the faces of beasts. They took some soil from the earth and modeled their man after their body, and after the image of God that had appeared to them in the waters. They said, "Come, let us take hold of it by means of the form that we may be modeled, so that it may see its male partner, and we may seize it with the other form that we have modeled," not understanding the partner of God because of their powerlessness. And he breathed into his face, and man came to have a soul, and remained on the ground many days. But they could not make it rise because of their powerlessness. Like storm winds, they persisted in blowing, that they might try to capture that image which had appeared to them in the waters, and they did not know the identity of its power. Now all these events came to pass by the will of the Father of all. Afterwards the Spirit saw the man of soul on the ground. The Spirit came forth from the adamantine land. It descended and came to dwell in him, and that man became a living soul. The Spirit called his name Adam, since he was found moving among the ground. The voice came from incorruptibility for all the assistants of Adam. The rulers gathered together all the animals of the earth, all the birds of the heaven, and brought them to Adam to see what Adam would call them, that he might give them a name, to each of the birds and the beasts. The ruler took Adam over to the garden, that he might cultivate it and keep watch over it. They issued a command, saying, "From every tree in the garden you shall eat, but from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat. But from the tree of knowledge of good and evil don't eat nor touch, for in that day you eat it, you will surely die." They said this to him, but they did not understand what they did. Rather, by the Father's will, they said this such a way that he might in fact eat, that Adam might not regard them as would a man of an exclusively material nature. The rulers took counsel with other, "Come, let us cause a deep sleep to fall on Adam." He slept. Now the deep sleep that they caused to fall upon him, and he slept, is ignorance. They opened his side, which was like a living woman, and they built up his side with some flesh in the place of her, and Adam came to be only with soul. The woman of spirit came to him, spoke with him, saying, "Rise, Adam." And when he saw her, he said, "It is you who have given me life. You will be called the mother of the living, for she is my mother. She is the physician and the woman, and she has given birth." Okay, there's much more to this story, but as you can tell, it's very similar. What we have here is a character, Yaldabaoth, who was cast out of the immortal realms, ended up on Earth, didn't understand the whole concept of a bigger God, thought that he was God because he had been cast out without knowing, and while in this state of ignorance, claiming himself to be God, the true God was revealed to him, and this simply set Yaldabaoth on in enragement. And in this state of being enraged, all he could think about was wanting to find a way to trap this spirit of God. So Adam, the skin suit, was made in order to be able to trap God within it. And there was that soul, and there was that skin suit. But it wasn't until the Spirit of God actually intervened to be able to breathe life into that being. Because without that spark of light from God, this being was just a soul, a body, and that was it. It was not animated with the full spirit of the Lord, full spirit of the Creator. And that is the important part of life, because we all have this spirit within us. But because of this story, we can see that there's a deep connection that is part of ourselves, where we are being influenced by others, where we are being influenced by evil and dark forces beyond our grasp. The things that we're fighting against are things that we are not normally able to see. It's not part of our visible world, therefore we need to find a way to stand against it. And if, as this story expresses, that the nature of who we are and why we came into being was simply as a vehicle to try to entrap the Spirit of God, we simply are those containers of God that are moving along, influenced by others, until we take control ourselves, till we know ourselves, and we decide that we are not going to have somebody else guiding us and influencing us, but we're going to allow that direct spirit connection to connect with us. Does that make sense? I hope it does, because I think it's all part of what's going on, this influence of darkness that is around us. It's a spiritual battle, my friends. It truly is. Now, the way that we fight against this spiritual battle, the words are out there. We must protect ourselves energetically, which is why I talk about energy as often as I do. We must learn how to work with the energies around us so that we can gather it around as a protection. Here in this particular passage, it talks about the armor of God, Ephesians 6:10 through 18. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in his mighty power. Put on the full armor of God so that you can stand against the devil's schemes. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore put on the full armor of God, so that when that day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything to stand, stand firm with the belt of truth buckled around your waist, with the breastplate of righteousness in place, and with the feet fitted with the readiness that comes from the gospel of peace. In addition to all this, take up the shield of faith, with which you can extinguish all the flaming arrows of the evil one. Take the helmet of salvation, the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and pray in the Spirit on all occasions with all the kinds of prayers and requests. With this in mind, be alert and always keep on praying for all of the Lord's people. Okay, very important. We are at a time where we are being tested. We're at a time where the story, if we look at the book of Revelation, is unfolding. There is truly a spiritual battle going on. We could look at the physical events taking place, say that's all that there is, or we could understand that there's a deeper influence. Not only is it pushing the buttons of these events, but it's pushing the buttons of each and every one of us. So on this day, let us pray that we are able to connect in with ourselves, connect in with that higher power that we have within ourselves, that spark of light, that we might activate this armor of protection around us, so we too might stand against all of the dark snares that are out there. Because believe me, my friends, they're out there, and if we don't find a way to block this and protect ourselves, then we just fall victims. And between all of the stories and information of darkness, we need to protect ourselves. That's it for today. I'll be back tomorrow with more news and information. I love you. Keep loving each other. Talk to you soon. Peace. I'm out of here.